So we're abiding by the rules. We're using the 3-to-1 rule for our mic placement. We're using approximately 1 microphone for every 20 vocalists to get the best sound. But what happens if you have an unusual choir configuration? Sometimes they're deeper than 3 or 4 rows. Sometimes they're way wider. Sometimes they're in circles. How do you deal with that?
Well, you really have to pay attention to sticking to the rules as best you can, but sometimes you have to break them to get the sound you're looking for and to hear everyone.
Right.
And really that's what's the most important thing, is we want to hear everyone. I was in a situation recently where I had a choir that was much deeper than I was able to pick up with just 1 microphone out in front. Okay. So I had to do a second layer of microphones, so I had the ones in front and ones about halfway back. But I still listened to my mics carefully. I still followed the 3-to-1 rule as best I could, tried to get my mics equidistant to my choir, so that the front row and the back row are pretty much the same distance from the microphone, and tried to make sure that I covered everything, so I was putting still 20 people to a microphone.
And this is where you can use the different polar patterns to your benefit, right? The cardioid and the hypercardioid.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Like we said earlier, hypercardioid microphones work better if you want to get the microphone a little closer to your singers. One time I had to mic a choir that was shaped like a U, and so I had 3 mics in front and aim them kind of away from each other, which is really excellent as far as maintaining the 3-to-1 rule, because they aren't going to interact at all.
Right.
But the problem with that is you leave these little holes.
Okay.
And so what I did is I took a hypercardioid microphone and put it in the holes where I was missing some vocals, and then blended those vocals all together on the board.
So you're kind of using the hypercardioids as spot mics.
Yeah, just trying to get those little areas that I missed with my main mics.
Now for your Easter service here at Sunset Presbyterian, you had a full stage with an orchestra and with a full band playing, drum set on stage, and a very wide but not very deep choir. So it filled pretty much the whole back row here. You used 4 microphones on that setting, right?
Yeah, well, I had the drum set up just right next to my choir. And I had a drum shield up, but that can still give you some trouble. So I increased the density of the number of mics I was using. I put the microphones a little closer together, mostly because I wanted to get a little closer to the voice sound. There was a lot of stage volume. And then what I did is I went up to the board and kind of turned the microphones up until they started to kind of ring a little bit. And then I switched the phase on every other microphone. And this doesn't always work, but in this situation it worked really well. And it kind of made those microphones not interact with one another so much, and gave me a nice clean choir sound. And I was able to turn the choir up, in a contemporary worship setting, louder than the band.
So you were normally going to be using, for 60 or so people in the choir, you'd probably be using 3 mics. You used 4, and then you placed them closer to the choir, right?
Yeah, I got them a little closer, and then I flipped the ones out of phase, and that seemed to really help.
To review, for difficult miking configurations, stick to the rules the best you can, but realize that sometimes you'll need to break them to pick up the whole choir. Generally use cardioid polar patterns to get the most of the choir, and use hypercardioid polar patterns when you need to reject adjacent unwanted sounds or to fill in the holes and missing voices in the choir. If you need to place the microphones closer to the choir than the equidistant mic technique suggests, or closer together than the 3-to-1 rule allows, then you can try flipping the polarity on every other microphone at the mixing board and carefully listen to see if it sounds better.